Hi, I'm Mark Shafer. I'm in the basement of the First National Bank in their meeting room, getting ready to chair a training session for volunteers interested in the Louden Machinery Company. I wanted to do a little bit of a review on our project. Sitting beside me is Will Page from Des Moines. He is our project coordinator. Is he going to wave at the camera or what?
Will is just going to be quiet.
Okay. Anyhow, one of the things that I'm real excited about, we just got a donation of materials that Lillian and Theda will talk about here in a minute from Mr. Cummings. I forget his first name. Is it? Doesn't matter. Well, she'll tell us. She just brought these things in. And one of the items I have is from the ACO Advancer. It's their bicentennial issue that has a section on the Louden Machinery Company in it. And I think we're doing a close-up of the cover right now. And on page 21, pages 20 and 21, there are pictures of William Louden and then an illustration from, I think, the 1868 catalog. That's this woodcut up here in the corner underneath my hand. It's an outdoor haystack, kind of a tripod system with a rope or a cable strung between with one of the original hay carriers. The thing that interests me about having this original document is this is the clue that told us that the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. had items in their collection from the Louden Company. This is, it says, the 1869 catalog of the Louden Machinery Company, in which this illustration of a hay carrier appeared, is now in the Smithsonian Institute collection. And for those of you that may have caught us on, I want to say C-SPAN, FPAC, excuse me, earlier, when I talked to the Historical Society down here, we had photocopies of barns that the Smithsonian has in their collection, glass plate negatives with the photographs made from those. So it's nice to have this little clue in the original format for our collection that's just been donated. Anyway, I'm going to break now and let Miss Theda talk about the pack of stuff she brought in this morning. And then Mrs. Engwall is going to talk about some things that she's donating to our collection.
I'm Lillian Theda, and I write a column for the town crier called Fairfield Reminiscences. And in it, I made a request for materials from the community to establish a Louden museum or to get information on the Louden Company. Well, that's been exciting because it's brought a lot of quick response. First one came from Gladys Geyer, who had a 1947 paper that gave the history of the beginning of the Louden Company. And then the next call came from Mrs. Glendimott. And she says, my husband worked for Loudens for 45 years, and his father before him, and his grandfather before him. So we have quite a Louden history. And she said, we have a lot of things that we think will be maybe lost that I'd like you to have for the society. And I have a total of 15 different items, like the Louden monorail catalog number 8. And then there is another one, Louden catalog. Well, I can't tell, but it says it was established in 1867, which gives us a little history. Lots of wonderful things which we may keep. And along with it is a big picture of Bruce Louden, who was the vice president when the group organized. And Mr. Dimmitt also has a couple of pulleys that he says that we may have for our collection. And they're very excited to see us get started. So we're grateful to the Dimmitts. And I think probably we'll pursue the history a little further because they've got 3 generations there that have worked in the Louden Company. Okay.
Want your glasses? No. I'm Nancy Engwall, and I'm the daughter of George Zellman, and he worked at the Louden Machinery Company for many years. I'm not certain how many, but among his things after he passed away, I collected the Louden catalogs that he had, and one of them is from July 1923, Louden Barn Plans, and there's the horse stable equipment, and then the Barnes, Better Barnes books, catalog 87 and 84, and then also the Hog House book. And I'm very excited about what is taking place here and wish them the best of luck. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure what, I just had the date on, well, this one's 1922. This one's 1922, and this one. Okay. Now, this one says 1956, copyright.
So that's a new one.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. This one doesn't have the date on it.
That's a nice. Open to the page that has the, some of the weather data.
This is the one that was 1923. Okay.
Or just something that might be of interest to people.
I am Omer Klingon, 2306 Glasgow Road. I'm interested in the buildings. They have a barn that might possibly be their Louden's blueprints or whatever.
I'm just interested in the history of Fairfield. I'm Fritz Hogan. I just had a couple items to give.
I'm Nancy Engwall, and my father was an employee of the Louden Machinery Company.
My name is Will Page. I'm a public historian and preservation planner. I live in Des Moines, Iowa.
I'm Mark Shafer. I'm chairman of the County Historic Preservation Commission. I guess I'm in charge of this, aren't I?
Yes, you're project manager.
That's right. I've got a title and everything. Anyway, I really like history, and I think it's exciting that we have such an important piece of it that we can document here in Fairfield.
And I'm John Griffith, and I live in one of the Louden houses in 107 West Washington. And I've met one of the Louden ladies who was born in our house.
Oh, yeah, Mrs. McCoy.
Yeah, in 1901, and now lives in Mount Pleasant.
I'm Ben Taylor. I live at 304 West South Main Street in Fairfield. I have a general interest in all preservation and historical affairs.
I'm Mildred Morton, and I volunteered because of Mark mainly to help him out if I could. And the fact that my husband was passing through Fairfield in 1940 and was asked to go to work at Loudon's, and we never left except for him to go to the Army.
I'm Lillian Theda, 204 East Hempstead. I'm on the County Historic Preservation Committee, and I also write a column, Fairfield Reminiscences, for the Town Crier, and I've used that column to ask for materials that we might use in the preservation work we're planning, and the response has been just excellent. So I plan to give a little update now and then.
I'm Gene Ludke. I'm a native Fairfielder and a member of the Jefferson County Historic Preservation Committee, and I have a general interest in Fairfield history and farm things in particular.
Everybody here, you're going to be counted minimum wage for the amount of time that you're here. We started at 10:30, and I have to keep...
That's 10:30 a.m., not the wage, $10.30
That's
an
right,
hour.
right. But I have to
This
keep-
is a federally funded project.
That's right. So anytime you do volunteer work for the project, you need to keep track of when you started your job and when you finished it, and round it off to the nearest half hour. That would be my guess.
If people wish to do that, they can, and I will have some forms if you wish to do that. This is rather an informal kind of recordation, and so if people can, at a next session, give an approximation if they've worked an hour or something like that, that would be sufficient
Okay.
to document
All
that.
right.
It's called match in kind. It's a way that the federal government uses its cash to double the impact of the grant. And so the time that volunteers spend is a legitimate time that otherwise would have to be paid for. And if people can, when people contribute to the project, your attendance here today, for example, is a contribution. This can be counted as an in-kind match to the cash match that the federal government is supplying.
And I think we'll also have to find out a fair market value for any of these catalogs or Louden equipment and so forth that are donated, because that can certainly be counted as a matching source. Okay, now, Will, I think it's all yours now.
Thank you. In 1993, the Jefferson County Historic Preservation Commission began a project called Planning for Preservation. And a year later, the result was this document here, which outlined a number of opportunities that the commission has to survey, to evaluate, and ultimately to register properties in Jefferson County on the National Register of Historic Places. The commission and I worked on this together, and one of the recommendations was to survey Loudon-related resources. And as a result, and as a next step, the commission applied to the State Historical Society of Iowa for a grant to survey and to evaluate these Loudon resources. The commission did a real good job in doing the homework and preparing the grant. In fact, the Loudon application, among a number of them that were submitted, was right up there at the top in terms of the importance that the State Historical Society of Iowa placed on all of the grant applications from across the state of Iowa. So I think that says something about the commission and the way that they did their job, and I think that says something about the resources here in Fairfield and Jefferson County as well. So now we are at this first session to outline a scope of work to survey these resources. The purpose of the survey is to list significant properties on the National Register of Historic Places. The National Register is the federal government's official list of those properties in the nation which are most worthy of preservation. And as you can see from this bulletin that outlines the procedures to list properties on the register, we're dealing with a government bureaucracy, and a bureaucracy that works really quite well. I'm excited about having been chosen by the commission as the consultant to work with you on this survey. And we're going to begin this morning by discussing a number of volunteer projects that people might be interested in participating in. And as the project goes on, it begins today, and our final work product has to be submitted to the State Historical Society of Iowa by June 30th of 1996. So we have about a year's worth of work ahead of us. And people that are interested in Loudon or interested in volunteering are certainly welcome to participate in the project. And I'd encourage you to contact Mark Shafer, the chair of the Jefferson County Historic Preservation Commission, and let your interest be known to him. What we're going to do here this morning, Historical Committee, is to discuss a range of volunteer options, and then actually, since we have manpower or person power here, we're actually going to roll up our sleeves and do some work. So this is just not going to be listening to Will talk. For the benefit of the listening public, however, I'd like to take 2 minutes before we break and discuss the scope of the survey. These topics are subjects, as it were, that are significant for Loudon, and these are the topics that we're going to be researching and interpreting over the next year's time. And they include William Loudon, business history, how did the business compete with other national businesses and so forth, product development, who invented the products, who refined the products, and so forth, equipment technology, the evolution of agricultural equipment, industrial production, what were the methods that Loudon used for efficiency, what Loudon products did Loudon use to construct Loudon products? Did they use the monorail? Well, one would think that they did extensively use the monorail for their own development and industrial production. Marketing. We've seen some examples of these beautifully graphic designed catalog books. A very important marketing tool. What other kinds of marketing tools did they have? Did they have sales representatives across the country? How did the system work? Planning services. These were the services that the company provided for farmers who were interested in buying Loudon equipment, and sometimes as a freebie, and sometimes probably as a fee. The Loudon Architectural Planning Service would design a farm structure for the producer. Local impacts. Loudon certainly made a significant impact in Fairfield and Jefferson County, and we'd like to flesh out what those are. And finally, and in a way, the culmination of all of this is the identification of associated resources. That is, what barns are still here, what kinds of buildings or structures or objects still remain in Jefferson County that might be eligible for nomination to the National Register of Historic Places. Just to give you an idea of the variety of these resources, when we were doing the Planning for Preservation project, we made a real short list of some of these resources we thought might be significant. And they included residential property types, the Loudon houses, industrial property types, the factory building itself, agricultural property types. The Loudondale barn is one example, and we hope to find any other number of examples. First United Methodist Church, designed by a Loudon employee and using Loudon equipment for the air circulation. Who knows what other kinds of applications we're going to find. Number of garages here in Fairfield, for example, that use Loudon hinges for the doors and so forth. So there's a wide open opportunity to find some very unusual property types as well as the standard ones we're going to be looking at. Let's break for a minute or two. Well, I think this whole idea of Yankee ingenuity and the tinker in America is going to be something that people will be looking at.
Yeah, I see some of the columns that are in my basement in this book.
Oh, really?
That's theirs too. I mean, they hold up. I mean, the floor in my house, I think.
is that for the house itself? Or
It's underneath the main sitting room. There's a couple
Oh,
of these
so
big
probably-
columns. I think they must have either,
Needed some reinforcement.
changed the walls around. or
Okay.
something.
Because the main part of your house was built in 1870, what?
Two, I think,
Two?
was on the window sill.
Yeah, there's a stone sill.
Yeah, and that was built by people called Elliot.
Okay. But then
Loudon's bought it
the
sometime
sun porch
about
was,
20 years after
yeah, and the
that.
sun porch was added in the 20s.
Yeah, that I've got the plans actually for that.
Oh, really? Okay.
Let's, first of all, let's go around and just make a list of the years that we have, and then I'll talk about what the assignment is. What I'd like to do is, we have an invitation to take a field trip to the Loudon House on Washington.
Mr. Griffiths.
So we need to be out of here by 20 till 12 at the absolute very latest, but until that time, let's work on this volunteer assignment, please. And it'll give you a taste of what the story is, and see if you like it or not. Not everybody likes guacamole, okay? First of all, let's do a list of the catalogs that we have. Mark, do you have? Can you give us just to start
Okay,
off? Or the numbered, even if we
Yeah,
have the catalog
okay,
number.
We have two 1918 catalogs.
Okay.
And Nancy, you have a barn planning book from 1923.
And this hog house book says copyright 1922.
Okay.
And I didn't find dates in the horse stable equipment.
One thing that you may find when you're looking for dates in these old catalogs is they may not have a copyright, but sometimes there'll be a letter of testimonial saying, oh, the Loudon products are great in my hog house, I've never had a better hog house, or whatever. And there'll be a letterhead with the date on that small reproduction of a letter. So sometimes you can get an idea of what, within a couple of years of what date that catalog was published. Yeah, Mackenzie, are you finding any dates over there? You have to look inside the cover.
Or what, Mackenzie, if you could just tell me the number of catalogs you have over there, or brochures, say 6 or 8, or?
Well, I have one here, it's 1913.
Okay, good.
I'll go over it. I'll just come
They
over
look
there.
in good order.
This is just catalog number 84.
1922 catalog.
Okay, was that, I beg your pardon?
1922.
Yeah, if you look in it, or if you haven't looked, you'll soon find the catalogs sometimes, in fact, kind of often, feature photographs of significant buildings and complexes that Loudon designed and built in different parts of the nation. And my idea is we want to try to get a handle on what is out there, not just in Jefferson County, but what is across the nation that Loudon constructed. And it appears from the catalogs that they featured, as a good business would, the sort of the sensational, the really big agricultural complexes they designed. So my idea was this: I think if each of us would take a catalog and take a piece of paper, go through the catalog, and then list what the featured facilities are that are pictured or one way or another indicated in the catalog. So we're going to divide the catalogs up in some way and keep them straight so we know who has the what. But if you would be kind enough to go through the catalog and then just make a list of the featured Loudon facilities that are identified, and put the page number where the photograph or whatever the information is. That will be the first assignment. And concurrently with that, my idea was to compose a letter, a generic letter, that we could send out to the different county historical societies in the location where the identified Loudon resource is. For example, there was one that was a real big facility in Toronto, Canada, for example. Here's when makers of the famous Hershey chocolates used Loudon barn equipment on their farms, someplace in Hershey, Pennsylvania. Anyway, compose a generic letter to local historical societies. Say in the letter that we have, found that you have this, at one time, this resource. What can you tell us? Is the resource still there? Has it been listed on the National Register? Do you have any information about that facility? And then we can get a kind of a national network going, and perhaps we'll find out some information that way that we don't already have or would never be able to have locally. So I need to have someone to volunteer to compose a generic letter that kind of outlining all of that stuff that we could send to local historical societies. Does that make sense? Okay.
John, would you like to volunteer for that? He's so good at legalese and all that. Yeah, another option we have is, I have photocopies here from the Smithsonian collection. These barn photos are not labeled. So I'm going to spread these out, and there's a chance we might run across some of these in the catalogs. So I'll put those on the table behind the camera over there, and I don't know what better way to do that, but.
That makes sense.
But they have a number. That means that's the number in the
That's the number of the glass negative.
museum.
That's the negative. That's just the number of the negative.
But they know exactly.
But they don't know what they have.
No, but that's that one. And you found out what it was.
Yeah. So I'll go take care of that.
And then the fourth volunteer opportunity is if someone is interested, actually, I suppose we'll have maybe a dozen letters altogether, maybe more, maybe less, I don't know. But if someone is interested in typing up letters to these various places or historical societies across the country, when we get the information, if someone was interested, as I say, in preparing the letters and sending them out, we'll bear the cost of the postage and that kind of thing. But that would be a very useful and very important aspect of this volunteer assignment. Before we leave, we need to come up with another date where we can get together and go from here. But in the meantime, Mark, let's try to get the catalogs organized so that.
I suggested to Nancy that she keep.
This looks to be the only duplicate. Why don't we give you another one? Ben, are you working on this? Number 51. Oh, this is 49. This is 48. We're working on some volunteer assignments now, and as the volunteers continue going through catalogs and making lists of nationally significant properties, Mark and I are going to talk about, just briefly, about the format that the information actually takes. The State Historical Society of Iowa has devised a form whereby information about buildings and structures and so forth can be organized in a standard way. And we'll be using these forms to document the properties we identify throughout the project. So I just wanted to show you, to give you an example of these forms, to give you an idea of what they look like. Can you see this, Susan, pretty well? Okay. The form actually has the historical name of the property, its address, and so forth, a small map. The form then also has a photograph of the property. And then there's a place for a statement of significance, a statement, a description of the physical physical description of the property and so forth. Now, since we're working on a number of farm-related resources, there'll be a special form for farmsteads. There'll be a place to list each of the standing structures on the site. Here's a map of the farmstead showing each of the standing structures in relationship to the highway, in this case at the farm abuts. And then a form for the barn itself, if we're documenting a barn. These checkoff boxes indicate the type of barn it is, how it's constructed. And then there's a place to draw a diagram of the bend, that is the structural member configuration whereby the barn is actually held up, and you see that drawn here. And then finally, there's a sketch of the floor plan of the barn. Here you can see there's stalls on each side of the building, and in the center there's an area for hay. Of course, none of this information can be seen from the outside, and that's the reason that the form is done. We'll be waiting till it cools off to do this interior look. And then finally, some photographs of the buildings that are being surveyed. That's it.
Okay. Okay, Will has just outlined the format for a site inventory. Presently, as a group, we're going to go over to the R.B. Louden House, now occupied by John and Paul Griffiths on Washington Street, just a couple of blocks from the bank here. And I wanted to share with you some of the preliminary work I've done that has specific relationship to that house. Last summer, about a year ago this week, I think, I had the pleasure of interviewing Roberta Louden McCoy. Shaking too much? Oh, there, okay. Will, you want to give me a steady hand here? Thank you. Anyway, John, let me move my hand. There we go. John Griffiths here had mentioned that he'd gotten to meet Mrs. McCoy. She showed up at his front door one day and asked if it was all right to come look at the house. And here's a view of the house the way it looked before it was remodeled in 1929. It had a wraparound porch, an open porch, and in the 20s they enclosed that, or they took it off, I guess, and just made a sun porch and a different, more formal entrance. And we're going to be going to look at this house. Mrs. McCoy was a wonderful primary resource. She had a lot of vivid memories of not only her family, but of the Louden Company in particular. Memories of the livery stable that kept the buggy, and how her father would call from the factory and tell her mother that he needed the buggy, so she'd go get it harnessed up and drive it over, and this, that, and the other. Here are some close-ups of that porch with the Louden family members standing in front of it. This was Christmas 1918. She was also an interesting primary source in terms of memories of Dr. Clark. He built the Prairie-style house on South Main that Nick and Jeannie Martin did such a nice job of restoring. And she could remember when it was built, and how people thought it was kind of an odd house, wondering why they put that blue bird cage over the front door. She's a really neat lady. She has lots of little anecdotes that are a lot of fun. Here's a picture of the backyard of the house with her playhouse, which was actually used originally as a display booth for Louden equipment. This could be taken around to different agricultural expositions and state fairs. And then she used it as a playhouse. And the funny thing about it was that when I was talking to her, I asked if she knew anything about this little shed that my uncle had at one time. My great-grandfather had bought it for a milk house or a storage shed of some sort. And she said, "Oh, that's what happened to my playhouse." So she got out these snapshots, and this is her cousin in front of it. And there's another snapshot that's fun too. It's of her climbing in the apple tree with the playhouse in the background. But the photocopy of it's very dark, and I'm sure wouldn't show up on film. She also had memories of a trip she took with her parents and Dr. and Mrs. Clark to an international Rotary convention. Now, Will had talked about the influence of the Louden Company on the community, and I believe that R.B. Louden, her father, was one of the founding members of the Rotary, and I believe her uncle, William Louden, the founder of the company, had something to do with starting the Elks Club here in town. Anyway, after they were done with their Rotary convention, they made a tour of Europe in the Clark's Buick touring car that they had shipped over. She said she brought her bicycle along, so she got to ride on the smooth bike paths and didn't have to ride on the bumpy cobblestone like they did. But they toured Europe, visiting different facilities that were equipped with Louden machinery or dairy equipment and so forth. And this is a chateau in the Bordeaux region of France that was owned by a man named Chernoff, who was a white Russian he was a white Russian aristocrat who fled the Bolsheviks when they took over Russia in 1917, 1918. He married an American railroad heiress, which recouped his ability to live in a high style. He bought this chateau in the Bordeaux region of France, deciding that they needed to drink more milk in that area, so he built a Louden dairy, and they got to visit that dairy. And the bottom photograph here shows one of the Cossack herdsmen holding on to one of the prized dairy cattle. So those are the kinds of connections that the house that we're going to be surveying here momentarily have with regard to the people that were involved with the Louden Machinery Company.
In catalog number 53, which postdates 1927, it's probably from 1928, is a reference to Louden single post stalls, and the caption says, "In the native home of the Guernseys on the tiny island of Sark." This is one of the 2 farms on the Guernsey Islands that are furnished with modern barn equipment. The island of Sark, I believe, is off the coast of Britain. Isn't part of the... And presumably it's the island on which the Guernsey cow developed. So that's a claim to some international significance and usage.
I have a catalog 43S horse stable equipment. And in the back, there's about 3 pages of cuts. There's just small places where there is equipment. Rank, R-Y-N-K-E farm in Gingenberg, Sweden. And then there's Corn Alpha Farms in Waukesha, Wisconsin, and a letter from them. And the Soldiers Home in Washington, D.C., Hershey Farms in Hershey, Pennsylvania, French Lick, the University of Illinois, Wilco Dairy Barn, St. Louis, Missouri, and Longview Dairy Farm, Kansas City, Missouri. So they stand clear across Missouri anyway.
Louden's barn plan had year of 1923 in the catalog. But there's a picture in there about G.M. Titus, Muscatine, Iowa. Now, I've been past that barn many a time because I used to live in Muscatine County, and I'm originally from West Liberty. Now, I used to rent a farm south of West Liberty, which had a manure carrier that went between 2 rows of stanchions, and it was made by Louden. I do remember that.
House book of 1922, and I thought it was interesting that there were several in there that were from the city. The city had a piggery, and a Minnesota Masonic home in Savage, Minnesota, and the city of Bridgeport, Connecticut, and there was one in Maine. Yes, the Hennepin. No, that was in Minnesota. But I thought it was really diverse, and also there was a barn in Mexico, School of Agriculture.
there's plenty of them in this catalogue, which is number 49. But I'll tell you about one that's here. That's from State Penitentiary in. What's that now? Yeah, this one here. So there's a photograph of the exterior and the interior. But this is another barn at the top.
Where is it located?
It's in Minnesota, is it? Yeah. So, I mean, it might be still there.
I've got General Catalog number 51, copyright 1922, issued May 1922. I'm about half through, and I've found 16 identifiable pictures of barns, and I was surprised to see that on page 60 there was a garage featuring a door owned by Charles Bogle, B-O-G-E-L, of Fairfield, Iowa. I'm about half through.
I have a Louden Hog House book, copyrighted in 1922. I guess the nearest one I found, I have not gotten very many, but the nearest one is at Hedrick, Iowa, a hog barn built by Colonel Cooper at Hedrick, and it might possibly still be there. The other thing was, I thought it was kind of interesting. I grabbed up this notepad to write on, and I found a list of a name of a place at, just a minute. The Louden Hog House, a picture of Louden Hog House belonging to C.H. Morse Jr. of Libertyville, Illinois.
I have the General Catalog number 54A, copyright 1932, and it's full of pictures that are identified. One of them is the South St. Paul Stockyards in South St. Paul. Another one is the Maryland State Hospital barn for their Holsteins. Mildred just mentioned the Morse Farm in Libertyville, Illinois. There are several pages where there are 4 identified barn pictures. And besides the one from Libertyville, Illinois, is the one from Barn to Field Without a Single Rehandling Necessary, Henry Wallace's Farm, Des Moines, Iowa.
I have a catalog from 1915, and many of those pictured are the same ones that have been mentioned previously. The one at the University of Illinois is in a round barn, and I think that's kind of interesting because it has a power hoist and full equipment at this round barn. In addition, I have a page of testimonials from various people around the country, and they vary from New York, New Jersey, Louisiana, and other towns around the country, including Illinois and Ohio and Iowa. In addition, it also lists several branch houses and distribution points for Louden equipment around the country. And they were at St. Paul, Minnesota, Albany, New York, Fort Wayne, Indiana, Guelph, Ontario, Canada, Kansas City, Missouri, Salt Lake City, Portland, Oregon, and Spokane, Washington.
Thank you for watching our program today, and I think as you've heard from the roundtable discussion of these lists of resources, not only is there a national significance, we're going to be finding possibly an international significance to the Louden resources. All of the next step in the project is that we are going to write letters to the historical societies in the various counties across the nation where these resources are located, and we're going to request of the historical societies any information they might have on whether these buildings that we have identified are still standing. So it's like if you're interested in a mystery story, if you're interested in detection, that's what this is about, and we'd sure encourage you to join our team. Thank you.
The date on the house is 1871.
Where was it?
In Chicago.
If you feel like lemonade or water, help yourself.
Thank you.
And it's planned by somebody you can see from Ottumwa for the Loudon, Mr. R.B. Loudon.
Didn't use his in-house architects.
Well, that's too bad. Shame on him.
And this is the coach house, which is, you know, this was actually, according to Mark, it had one of the first automatic opening doors.
Yeah, at one time there were these odd kind of posts on either side of the driveway with these big things that looked like trunks, elephants' trunks. And you insert your key in the end of the trunk, and that would open the door.
So there's the front of the garage before it was turned
Okay.
into the present apartment.
And the blueprints of the garage are stamped by the Louden Machinery Company.
Oh, thank heaven.
So they were designed by them, by the Department of Agricultural Engineering,
Great, great.
1929.
Well, yeah, that's also stamped Loudon's.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's the coach
In
house.
fact, the draftsman is TGL. Would that be Thomas G. Loudon?
I don't know. We'll have to find out. But the doors that are on the
They're on the bike shed now.
Yes, the bike shop now has those doors.
Yeah, and it has the track.
And the track is still in there. Okay.
But the motors are not on it.
Oh, they're not.
No, as far as I can see, there's no sign of any motor.
Now, John, are these because these are in kind of ragged condition? Are these something that can be replicated?
Yeah, I made a few photocopies, but they're not bigger than normal photocopiers.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
But that's something we need to
Yes,
have
they
for
can
our
be
archive.
photocopied on rag paper, so
Yeah.
archival.
Good.
So I'll give them to you, Mark, and you can
Oh.
yeah, you can see what you can do, maybe.
Okay. Well, I know when Martin's had their blueprints for the Clark House, and they had those inside of plastic of some sort.
Yes, the best thing to do is to take them apart and to encapsulate them between sheets of archival mylar. Yes.
I mean, this is quite well preserved
Yeah,
because
that's
obviously
very
it
nice.
wasn't.
Are these the written specifications?
Yes. Isn't that interesting? I mean, they've remained in the house since that. I mean, there's a lot of other things. So this would be of interest, obviously, if you're looking for Loudon stuff. So I'll give you the box of them, and you can see what you can do with them.
Okay. Great.
And you have, it probably is the best thing to do is to make copies, isn't it? So I suppose maybe even some of the tracks of the doors. There's two different kinds of tracks on my sliding doors. Whether they're Loudon or some other kind, I don't know. One of them is a single track, and the other's inside a girder.
Well, that's something we'll have to investigate, I guess. We're inside the R.B. Loudon house right now. That's the home of John and Paul Griffith. This is the front hallway, and it has a very, very nice newel post. A rather large laminated oak affair. And I don't know if this is original to the 1871 design of the house or if this was installed at a later time. Underneath the stairway is a little closet, and Mrs. McCoy was telling me that when she was naughty, she would get locked in a closet for a specified time. But there was a little sliver of light she could see through, so she didn't feel particularly claustrophobic, and she thought that was pretty funny that she was outsmarting her folks. And here's one of the parlors, and I think the chandelier is especially nice. It has those little kind of Art Nouveau female faces surrounding the chandelier. A lot of the artwork you see in the house belongs to John's family. These were ancestral portraits. He's from Ireland, and a number of the antiques are things that have been in his family for many, many years, which is appropriate for this house because when Gladys Ball lived here, she had a fabulous collection of antiques, and I remember particularly her Tiffany floor lamp that brought a pretty hefty sum at her auction. Okay, now we're in one of the additions that we looked at in those blueprints. This is the sun porch that was put on in 1928-29. Mrs. McCoy told me that the house didn't have fireplaces, and they missed having a fireplace. So that was one of these, one of the things they had on their want list for this addition was to put this fireplace out here. It has a real nice tile floor.
This is real tile?
I believe so, yeah.
Wow. And this piece over here, is that old?
No, I think that's something that John and Pritpal put in. It's a little garden sink. Looks to be porcelain. This is the dining room, of course. A nice paneled ceiling. And the sideboard over there on the east wall is a Sheraton-style sideboard from Ireland. And on the sideboard itself, on top of that box in the middle, is an early 20th century copy of an ancient Celtic bowl. It's a famous cauldron of some sort, and I forget the name of it, but it's a very, very nice copy. An old chalice, I should say.
You know who I would love though?
The paneling here in the kitchen was originally in the dining room of one of the old Turney houses, which stood on the corner of 2nd and Burlington, just diagonal from this property. The Radio Shack or whatever is there right now.
And the little curved stairs, I love those.
Yeah, you want to take a look up the curved stairs?
And this
And here are the back stairs, I assume, for the maid to...
Oh no, it's the children or something.
Oh, so the children. Okay, I thought
Exercise in the winter.
I thought maybe to keep the maid out of sight. Who knows? We're heading down into the basement now to look at some Louden hardware of some sort. I'm not sure what we're looking for.
Yeah, catalog. That's right.
Yeah, John is saying that the catalogs that we were going through at our meeting. You want to stand there and point it out, John?
This column now is in the, whatever it is, 50-something catalog, number 52, I think. So it says a Louden reinforced catalog. A column, I should say.
So it's an iron column filled with concrete?
It seemed to say that.
Okay. Does it have the name Louden on it anywhere?
Well, I just saw them in the book and I said that's what they are.
Oh, okay.
They must have been made for exactly the right size, otherwise
Sure.
they wouldn't have fitted in.
Because the other supports down here are logs.
They're either these old wooden ones or the more modern jacks. And under here is, over there is where the Louden tracks are, but you wouldn't want to see.
Oh, I see. So are they just...
They're just holding up that sun porch.
Okay, so our Louden track is holding up the floor of the sun porch.
Yeah.
Nice old cast iron grate.
And return air.
Okay, for the return air, cold air register. Does the well still work?
Well, that one was too. I think there was a cistern underneath where the other room, the balls added is under that, and there was then another pump in the back hall that goes down to where the well was, but that was taken away.
Okay. It may be Lynn Crusta, which was a kind of artificial embossed leather-like material that the Victorians were fond of. And
It's not leather.
Well, it might be, but I know.
Might be kind of
But there was
Yeah.
a product called Lynn Crusta that was made to look like leather. But this is the closet that Roberta was locked in.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then what-
she was, she had to. She said she was very entertained because she could actually look out of all the cracks, and so they used to wonder. So we have to bring her back.
Do they need to have I wanted to make sure John and Pritpal got on camera. We really appreciate you for opening up your home for our little foray into the Louden Machinery Company, our training session.
We want to thank Fairfield, and we want to thank this beautiful home. We love living in it, and we love other people enjoying it. So if anybody feels like coming to see it, you're very welcome.
Oh yeah, doing a detailed survey or whatever you want to do. Yeah, that's fine too.
Okay, well, thanks a lot for viewing, and if anybody has an interest in the Louden Machinery Company, you be sure and give us a holler.